Are we ready? Well, good morning, and at the outset, let me thank everyone here at the CityLights Co-op for hosting us today. We are blessed with the Speaker of the City Council and two other City Council people, as well as Mark Ricks, our Chief Operating Officer of the Special Initiative for Rebuilding and Resiliency, and John Lee, Deputy Director for Green Buildings and Energy Efficiency, Office of Long-Term Planning and Stability. And if you can write that down as fast as I can read it, good luck to you. Seriously, when Hurricane Sandy hit us, this building experienced flooding from the nearby East River. Fortunately, it did not suffer any structural damage, but for 2 days, the residents of this building found themselves without elevator service, which in a 44-story high-rise like this isn't just an inconvenience, it can be a threat to the health and well-being of the residents as well. And as a result, they decided to take steps to design to protect their property and safety in the future, and we will hear about those in a few minutes. Sandy clearly underscored why we need to do more to protect the buildings in our city, and not just from hurricanes, because as we stressed in our speech Tuesday and in the Resiliency report we released the same day, we're not going to make the mistake of preparing to fight the last war. We have to be able to withstand and recover quickly from all of the hazards posed by climate change. Floods and severe heat waves, for example, as well as from major coastal storms. And that's why after Sandy, City Council Speaker Quinn and I asked Russell Unger, the Executive Director of the Urban Green Council, an organization dedicated to achieving sustainability in our city's built environment, to help us address this enormously important task. Over the past 6 months, the Urban Green Council has benefited from the input of architects, engineers, building managers and owners, members of the building trades, and others. A total of more than 200 men and women with expertise in this field took part in this Building Resiliency Task Force. Commissioner Robert Lamandry and his team at the City Department of Buildings and Commissioner Amanda Burden at the Department of City Planning also played big roles in this effort. And today, here we are some 6 months later, and we're delighted to accept their report and begin the process of putting it into action. The broad outline of this task force report described in the Building Resiliency recommendations that were released were described in the Building Resiliency recommendations that were released on Tuesday. What they and we are presenting now is the real nitty-gritty. There's specific recommendations covering important ways to make every kind of building in our city safer in the future. Some call for changes in the city buildings codes will be governing new construction, and in some cases also require upgrades in existing structures. They will now be taken up by the City Council and go through the legislative process of becoming city law. Other recommendations spelled out the best practices that building owners and managers should follow, such as improving communications to tenants and building resiliency features and the procedures to follow during emergencies. And because this report has input from the Real Estate Board of New York and other key real estate industry groups, we're confident that they will quickly be widely adopted. Let me provide an example of what we are proposing today. A recommendation in today's report and in the Resiliency report released on Tuesday would make it easier for buildings to have innovative power systems that will operate during blackouts or that reduce their dependence on the larger power grid. Those are the kind of steps that post-Sandy, the CityLights Co-op is taking by installing solar panels and a combination heat and power cogeneration system. The residents here were already thinking about putting in such systems before Sandy. After the storm, they made that a priority. And we'll hear more about the recommendations in this Building Resiliency Task Force report in a moment. First, I just wanted to thank everyone from management, organized labor, academia, city government, and other fields who contributed more than $1 million worth of voluntary labor to it. It's an example of the cooperative spirit that not only got us through Hurricane Sandy, but that's also now going to help us make our city safer and stronger in the future. So on that note, let me turn over things to the Speaker of the City Council, Chris Quinn, who has worked with us every step of the way. We all have the interests of making sure that we're not fighting the last war, but that we're even better prepared than we were for the next time than we were this time. We learned a lot, and we're going to make sure that we do not forget those those lessons. Chris?
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, let me, in addition to the folks you recognize, thank the Chair of our Environmental Protection Committee, Jim Gennaro, for being with us, and our host Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer. And I also want to recognize that we're joined by the former council member from this area, Ed Sadowski, who is now the president of the co-op here. So thank Ed for being with us as well. And I really want to start off by thanking Russell Unger and everyone at the Urban Green Council. This is not the first time we've called on you to help us improve the city of New York, so thank you very much. And the 200-plus members of the Building Resiliency Task Force who took this project very, very seriously. And strengthening our city's infrastructure today will save billions of dollars in the future, and more importantly, will save lives. The task force report provides the city with a clear direction on how to make our buildings more resilient and helps us protect our businesses and our homes and people's lives. It's been about 8 months since Sandy arrived in New York City, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The surge reached 14 feet, overwhelming some sewer systems, shutting down mass transportation, flooding subway stations, tunnels, underground electricity infrastructure, and thousands of homes and businesses. About 6.6 million businesses and residential structures were left without power because of the storm. People didn't have water or heat even as temperatures began to drop. And of course, as the mayor said, elevators weren't functioning. Buildings, therefore, became uninhabitable. It became clear because of all of this that we needed to have a better understanding of what caused some of our buildings to fail and what made others more resilient and safer for New Yorkers during the storm. As a result, in the weeks immediately after the storm, I, along with the mayor, reconstituted the Building Resiliency Task Force and asked them to look at how we could prepare the city's buildings to deal with the effects of climate change, storms like the one we had, but we also asked them to look at other issues, high heat days, drought, and flooding that could occur for other reasons. We needed to know how we could build better, stronger, more protected communities and make our neighborhoods safer for families and businesses. Over the past 5 months, the group of over 200 appointed experts, which included city officials, engineers, property managers, architects, and many more, met repeatedly to create, discuss, and finalize their proposals. Today, the task force has come out with 33 recommendations for making buildings more resilient. These recommendations include building code changes, best practices, and the removal of barriers that would enable greater resiliency. Inadvertently, we actually have things in the law that prevent many businesses and residences from doing what they know they should do. We need to take those out because they are, with the force of law, and really do put you in a situation where you can't move forward. Some of the highlights include a proposal to have the Office of Emergency Management and the Department of Buildings work with building owners to come up with model emergency plans. These plans would include maintaining communication with residents and ensuring they're kept up to date during an emergency storm. And when evacuation is not possible, giving them information about sheltering in place. It seems obvious a building should have an emergency plan, but not every building knows how to make an emergency plan, so we're telling the city agencies, come up with templates, and then buildings can adopt them. Proposals also to require buildings to have common areas so residents can access drinking water during and after an emergency. When the power goes out, drinking water can't be pumped above 6 stories. So it's important, this recommendation, that'll create a common space so all residents have a source of drinking water during and after emergencies. That'll allow a lot of people to shelter in place, stay in their homes. Also in this report, we have proposals to allow larger fuel tanks above the flood line. This would allow owners of buildings in the 100 and 500-year floodplains to store enough fuel to power emergency generation and keep that fuel safe from flooding, which is a practical sense thing, but we need to remove the obstacles to make this happen and think and plan how we do it right. And finally, a proposal to design streets and sidewalks, and today is a good example of why we need it, a proposal to design streets and sidewalks to capture the maximum amount of storm water in order to prevent flooding. You can do this by the materials you're using and how you're building and rebuilding sidewalks. There are important lessons from Sandy because we know storms like Sandy have the potential to unfortunately be the new normal. This was quite a substantial task, and I really want to thank Russell Unger and everyone at the Urban Green Council and everyone in the Building Resiliency Task Force for taking so much time for free to work on it. Your expertise and experience have been invaluable in this effort. We will be reviewing the bills, and the Council will consider a number of the legislative proposals from the report at our final Sandy oversight hearing on June 27th. We plan to move as quickly as possible. Some of these recommendations need to be enacted through legislative change. Other are best practices. We will start on June 27th, moving forward with those that need legislation. And I just want to single out Laura Popa from the Council staff for all of her good work on this effort. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Chris, thank you. Finally, I want to again thank Russell Unger and everyone at the Urban Green Council for their hard work on these building resiliency recommendations. Russell, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your introduction. Thank you, Chris, and Mr. Mayor for keeping us busy for the last 6 months. We saw all sorts of things during Sandy that we don't need to see again. Homes literally washed away, people groping their way up darkened stairwells, faucets that ran dry and toilets that wouldn't flush, people shivering in blankets in unheated homes and apartments, sewage that backed up into basements, and buildings that were totally unprepared. They didn't know they were in a flood zone, never mind had a sandbag anywhere to be seen. And the next time we could see worse weather. Stronger winds could take everyday objects and make them into missiles, injuring people and downing trees. We could have a blackout during extreme heat or extreme cold. It's my honor to present to the Mayor and the Speaker today this report. It's a blueprint to ensure that buildings are prepared for whatever weather and climate change may throw at us next. As both the Mayor and the Speaker have mentioned, it's the work of over 200 people, so I'm really here as a representative of them. And its main findings were incorporated into the SIR report, and I'm joined today by the Managing Director for this effort, Cecil Scheib, who's somewhere around here. Oh, waving his hand. If history is any guide, one emergency we know we're going to face again is a blackout, and we hope there won't be too many of these, but our biggest concern is a major blackout again. We've had 4 since 1965, and it's critical that New Yorkers have access to water for drinking and to flush toilets, have lighting, they can go in and out of their apartments, and have homes that can remain habitable even if it's really hot outside or really cold outside and there's no power. As the Speaker mentioned, we need to have water pumps in drinking faucets in common areas so people have drinking water even if pumps fail. New apartment buildings should have lighting in corridors and stairwells, and we should look towards existing apartment buildings retrofitting to that point in a few years. We should never again see people groping their way up darkened stairwells. We're yet to lose the natural gas system in our city despite our history of blackouts, so we should be leaning on that more heavily. So the cogeneration system the Mayor mentioned, this building, is a model that other buildings should look to. That because if the natural gas system stays online, that means the building will still have hot water and some power even if the grid goes down. We need to have better insulated residential buildings so that if heating fails, it'll still remain warm enough inside even if it's really cold outside. And we should be doing these sorts of things anyhow because it makes economic sense and it helps fight climate change, which is part of the reason we're seeing extreme weather in the first place. Homes should be strapped to their footings so they don't literally wash away. No one should be coming back to their neighborhood after being evacuated because of flooding and see their house lying in the middle of a street. And we should do simple things, like just use longer screws to attach roofs, windows, and doors so that they can withstand higher winds. And as the Speaker mentioned, we certainly need to make sure that buildings have plans in place so they know what to do. And we need the city to work with the private sector to come up with templates and actively reach out to buildings in their flood zone so they're better prepared. We weren't fully prepared for Sandy, but we certainly can be better prepared the next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
Russell, thank you. Let me just summarize for our Spanish-speaking audience before we take questions on topic. Estamos mejorando las leyes de las operaciones de los edificios en nuestra ciudad para protegernos mejor de los peligros de cambio climático y los huracanes. And with that, we'll be happy to take some questions.